Saturday I got thinking about, I don't know why, but you remember Kramer, Michael Richards, when he
Yeah,
had his thing where he had his
you can't
thing.
forget that.
Well, you can't if you were alive then.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was shocking.
yeah, it was. It was what like the
I,
first.
it was what he was going for, and it was not what he was going for, all at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. So, for some reason, it crossed my mind, and I just thought, well, that was pretty crazy. And then I started thinking about, boy, Jerry Seinfeld sure was a nice friend to go on Letterman like 2 days after that.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
Um, and so at the time, so this is the first big cancel that happened publicly. I mean, you like viral videos.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like that's just at the.
you had other celebrities say things that were untoward,
But it was in
but
print.
they didn't get canceled.
But that was the first time it was like news outlets and the
Yeah,
internet. It
yeah.
was easy to share a video of Michael
hmm
Richards saying terrible things.
YouTube. Yeah, you're right.
And if you're gonna like, if you need any screenplay ideas and you're thinking of like worst thing to happen to somebody, beloved star that's like very benign and like
Everybody loved him.
who doesn't love
Everybody loved
Kramer?
Kramer.
Yeah. So for him to like be on video, and it's not even like it slips one time, it got misconstrued.
It's pretty obvious.
He did. So
So for the audience, we're tracking now. We'll just pick
okay,
up somewhere
good.
in here.
Yeah.
But for the audience, if you don't know what happened, you can look up Michael Kramer stand-up meltdown.
Michael Richards plays Kramer. Yeah.
plays Kramer, and he basically goes on an insane racist rant, yelling at some black folks in the audience, and it's like a borderline where it starts out where it's like he's being heckled, but he just goes like 0 to like 60, like and there's no way it gets ugly so fast that you're like, that's a crazy racist guy. I don't know how else you look at that.
I hesitate to say that I like can sympathize with him, because what I mean by that is not like you should just definitely go throwing N-words at people and commit to it. But what I mean is, have you ever been like I've done this on stage where I think the crowd is with me and I make a comment and just didn't read the room right.
Yeah.
You have two choices, and I think the correct choice almost every time, unless you're at the Laugh Factory and you call people the N-word. But like I made a misstep. One time I made a misstep recently where I made fun of Nickelback in front of a casino crowd
that loves Nickelback.
Yes.
Nickelback.
And I just thought, okay, my bad. I forgot you guys don't have good taste in music. But I had no choice but to lean into it.
Yes, always lean into it. Unless you're using a racial slur,
Exactly.
Don't lean into it.
So I thought, he's Kramer. His default for comedy is like full tilt, lean into it more.
Yeah.
And eventually it will work. And I think that's what his instincts told him to do. And I think he thought, like a lot of comedians will do, I'll get half of the room to come with me on this. And he just made the wrong call. And
it could be, not arguing for Michael Richards, but him saying like, it could be that he's so not racist, that he considered it so absurd, to use that language, that he thought, oh, they'll understand I'm being absurd, I don't think that's what was happening in the video, but
no.
But I'm just saying, like, maybe back in that artist mind, he was thinking, yeah, it's pretty absurd. Who would use that word? You know what I mean? Like oh, well, I will, because I'm the guy that pushes the envelope.
That's live by the sword, die by the sword as a comedian. They say a lot of risky things. The ones that we see work out, it's a home run. But you can strike out as well. I'm like you, like treading lightly. Like, I'm not condoning the language. I'm just saying I understand what it's like to be in front of people, make a misstep, and then like a referee in a big game, you can't walk it back. You have to stick with the call that you made in the play. Otherwise, you're not the referee. You're not the stand-up. You're not the entertainer. So that had my mind going. But then I got to thinking about like what a great friend Jerry Seinfeld is.
Yeah.
To go on Letterman at the time, which was...
And nobody else did.
Exactly.
Nobody
Yeah.
else. He was one of the biggest stars on the planet.
Yeah.
And nobody came out to say like, hey, let's show some grace. Let's like not be, he's feels awful.
If you take the time to watch Michael Richards at the Laugh Factory having this meltdown, go ahead and take the time to watch
Seinfeld on Letterman. Yeah.
And you'll see a lot of commentary that it's an awkward apology, and it is. And even Michael Richards, when he's piped in on satellite on Letterman, says, I don't know that this is the venue for this.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, there is this proverb that says something about don't withhold good from those who deserve it. And I kind of take that to mean like, if you're in a position to help somebody, do everything you can without putting yourself in a compromised position. Seinfeld had all of this credibility, had all of this cachet as a celebrity, and he did everything he could to help his friend to just say, hey guys, I'm not condoning what he said. I just want you to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I can tell you, as somebody that worked closely with him for 10 years, he really isn't that guy. He made a bad call. He's willing to apologize and tell you he made a bad call. And it didn't play off well, but I still...
No, and it didn't, because the venue was wrong. Richards was right. It's a comedy show. And I remember the moment that Seinfeld, he said something about it, and it was like the audience started to laugh, and he actually shushed the audience. It was like, I'm not joking.
Right.
Like, this isn't funny.
Yeah.
And then everyone was uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're used to...
He's right. You can't, people are there for a reason. They're there to laugh and to enjoy themselves. And, you can't blame them for like thinking it's a joke. It's a comedian,
And Michael Richards especially does so much physical comedy that when the first time you see him sitting awkwardly and people kind of start laughing, you are expecting...
You assume it's Kramer. Yeah.
So that's a long way to get around to when you talk about my process. That I thought about that all day Saturday, and I talked to people that didn't care to hear me talk about it later that day, because it just was like going through the process of thinking what it's like to be Michael Richards, going through the process of thinking of being in somebody like Seinfeld's position to help him out, thinking about being David Letterman, to allow that to be on your show and try to navigate that as the host, going, this is the biggest story that happened this week, so I'm glad to have the audience, but I'm also here to be funny. How do I make that work? I mean, like, there's just a lot of things at play there, a lot of dynamics.
What you're describing there is contemplation.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a nun, and she is going to a convent in Italy. I heard from a friend of a friend, she's going there. And so I haven't spoken to her, so I don't know much about it, but they were telling me like, yeah, and it's a silent convent, so that they can't speak at all when they're there. And all they do is contemplate. And I was like, that's pretty, especially because I was thinking about my process and all this. I thought, I bet you think of a lot of things that you never would have thought of before. You kind of think like, well, God, that seems like a waste of time. You're just going somewhere to do nothing for like months. And then you think
it's incredibly useful.
Yeah, actually, maybe you go there for months to do nothing. And in the last 5 minutes of you being there, you think of something that absolutely transforms your entire life. And then you go, well, okay, that's the point of it.
Yeah, that I'd already been thinking about that. Do not withhold good, like as an idea. But Seinfeld going on Letterman, trying to help his friend, even if you could make an argument that it wasn't wholly successful. A lot of people thought that was a fail. I thought, doesn't matter.
No,
I mean,
you're right.
Like, that's what it looks like to do your best.
That was the right thing to do.
Yeah,
100%.
So yeah, contemplation. That's
contemplation.
I like that a lot.
Maybe that's your dad hack for the day, is that take time to contemplate and be intentional about whatever your process is. You gotta do it. Like, there's gotta be time to stop and think and reflect.
Yeah. My wife's really good about it. Jocko says up before the enemy, my mom was great about being up long before I was out of bed. And I'm finding it's really useful to be up. Very best is to be up, dressed, and like have had 30, 45 minutes to contemplate and just sit still when your kids walk out sleepy. Like, you really got the jump on the whole situation. and you don't feel behind the 8 ball. So it's good dad hack. Yeah.
Good dad hack. Okay. Welcome to the Conspiracy Dad podcast. We are happy to be here and so excited for all of you to join us on this journey into Laurel Canyon. So we are revisiting one of our favorite people, the late, great Mr. Dave McGowan.
Yeah.
And so if you don't recall, Dave, definitely beyond the shadow of a doubt, proved that we did not land on the moon. I feel pretty confident of that.
I made a new friend list this week that very quickly, like, our conversation was something like blah, 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 conspiracy theories. And then the other guy just blurted out, I don't even think we landed on the moon. I was like, no, we did not land on the moon.
I mean, anyone that I talk to about it, when it comes up, I just kind of go, well, do you know who Dave McGowan is? And if they say no, I just say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. So you should go read Dave McGowan's work, and you'll agree with me that we probably didn't land on the moon.
I can say as a convert specifically on that topic, like, as soon as I found out, I've heard you make the comment about Jim Morrison as a CIA.
Yeah.
Like,
now you understand.
That's a real, like, Cliff Note version of hearing you say that, but I've not really spent a lot of time thinking about it. And then I got into it a little bit and found this book by Dave McGowan, and I thought, oh no, I am, like, done for. And yeah, here we are 3 days later.
Maybe we are just too stupid to see through Dave's logic and facts and reason. But it's a weird thing, because most of the people that will call you a kook and a conspiracy theorist, they've never researched it. They don't know what you're talking about. Like, I feel confident if you looked into his research, you would come away with me and say, you're right. It seems like things aren't what they appear to be.
He early in the book, you've said before about, like, well, if he's not an expert, who's an expert? When we talk about other conspiracy type subject matter, and we talk about specialists and things. Somewhere early in the book, sorry to say what the book is.
Title.
It's called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And so it's a book by Dave McGowan. I will put a link in the show notes. I found a free PDF you can download of the whole book.
Well, I know that he died of lung cancer probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little less. And his daughter runs 2 websites that kind of continue his work into the world. The one is the Center for Informed America, I believe.
That's where I got all that.
Yeah. And then the other one is just, I think, a Facebook page that is the title of that book, which is, say it again. It was
Weird Scenes
in
Inside
the Canyon. Inside the Canyon on Facebook. And so I think that a lot of his work, because he's dead, she's just like, I mean, all they care about is they want people to know we didn't land on the moon.
Right. Yeah.
Like, here you go. Here's his research.
Yeah.
All they want to know is that, Jim Morrison was working for the CIA.
Yeah.
So they put it out there. And I don't think there's a lot of, that's kind of what I like about him. There's no financial interest.
No.
He's dead.
Yeah. He's not taking.
When he was alive, he didn't make a lot of money off this. And now that he's dead, nobody's making money off this. It's his daughter just wanting to keep his memory alive. And that's a pretty fair, I mean, you could say he's wrong or he's right, but you can't call him some kind of grifter,
Yeah, right.
Not,
Yeah, I guess the point I was making is he says something early on about, you can say this or that's a coincidence, but how many coincidences does it take? And at some point, we can get into one of the quotes where he just lines up one after another, and I mean, it's like, how many of these stars do you need to know have parents not just in the military, but specifically in the intelligence department of the military?
So just to clarify what the conspiracy is,
right?
Dave has a book that goes deep into all of this, but it's funny. I was telling our friend Brad, who works in the music industry, I was trying to explain this to him a couple years ago. and he would have none of it. He's like, give me a break.
Cane's bread?
Yes. Okay. About like, that basically that the CIA really probably orchestrated the hippie movement. Like they created the hippie movement and they used it as a controlled opposition during the Vietnam War and, during the anti-war movements. So, you have all of these huge stars coming out of this very specific place, Laurel Canyon in California. And well, Dave gets into it, but you go through star after star after star, and they all come from military intelligence families. And that's his point by saying, like, well, yes, it could be a coincidence that Jim Morrison's dad started the Vietnam War, and then he went on to be the idol of the anti-war movement, you go, but like, you add that into like 30, 40 other of the biggest stars on the planet, all coming from military intelligence backgrounds. At what point do you think, seems like they're picking kids from military intelligence families and then pushing them into pop culture to control a narrative, or even to control like I think one of the examples, who was the speaker during the hippie movement in the 60s? It was really vulgar. I can't remember his name.
Abbie Hoffman.
Yeah, Abbie Hoffman. Like, how do you get a bunch of angry, organized, anti-war people to just basically lose their steam and become useless? Well, you introduce LSD and other drugs, vice. You push vice on them. And he hated the hippie movement.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
He's one of these guys who's seriously anti-war and blah, blah, blah. And he hated the hippies because they were dirty. They were drugged out of their minds. They made the entire anti-war movement look like a joke. And I guess that would be would you agree that's kind of the premise of McGowan's theory, is that, like, yeah, they created it as a controlled opposition that they could then use to discredit the anti-war movement.
Yeah, that's a really good summary of kind of the thesis of the book. And McGowan's position is, you had some intelligent, organized people saying, guys, I don't know if we should even be over there in the Deep East. Let's like make some rallies and stuff. And it's not unusual in the protest world, not just in the 60s and 70s, but even current day protests for different reasons. You hear a lot of times like the organizers saying, geez, we went out there, everything was going really well, felt like we were making some progress. And then, of course, there was this pocket of people that went nuts and lit a car.
January Sixers.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And I've heard it on both sides. An organizer in an interview will say, we were having a good event and it really was going well. And then there was this crazy pocket of people. So, yeah, you're right. There's a quote here in the book that says, some on the left even theorized that the hippies were the end result of a plot by the CIA to neutralize the anti-war movement with LSD, turning potential protesters into self-absorbed navel gazers. An exasperated Abbie Hoffman once described the scene as he remembered it thusly. There were all these activists, Berkeley radicals, White Panthers, all trying to stop the war and change things for the better. And then we got flooded with all these like flower children who were into drugs and sex. Where the hell did all the hippies come from?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you said. I mean, you had an organized, deliberate acting person trying to make some change. And then these dirty hippies show up just laying around.
St. Augustine, I think, maybe it was Aquinas, but a man serves as many masters as he has vices. And that's a thing that, like, you got to remember, if Augustine knew it, the CIA knows it too. And it's like, how do you get people divided and distracted? It's like, it's easy. The devil figured this out long ago. It's not even hard. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever. Yeah. And you'll forget all about those people dying across the ocean.
Now, I was curious what your thoughts were on this. Like, we could start with Jim Morrison. He's an Navy admiral's son. His dad is over the fleet that was on duty during the Gulf of Tonkin
incident.
Yeah. McGowan's, he's making the point that Morrison's dad, put the whole thing together. Wikipedia dismisses that, but so there are people saying, well, he wasn't really that closely related. He was over the whole fleet. He wasn't actually on the ship that reported attacks from North Vietnam. But regardless, that is...
he was probably still the one who reported to Congress and to the president.
Yeah, if you're over the whole fleet.
We've been fired on by the North Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And then they specifically used that. And the thing to remember now is back then, we believed it.
Sure.
But it didn't come out, I believe, until like the late 70s, early 80s, that wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's been admitted that didn't happen, that the North Vietnamese never fired on us, and we never should have gone to war in Vietnam.
I went back in my Vietnam book by, Max Hastings, I think is the name of the author. And just listened to the chapter on the Gulf of Tonkin today. And really short Cliff Note version of that is like, we had been over there with quote unquote advisors for a little bit of time. And it was one of those where Kennedy's been assassinated. Johnson's in a position where he doesn't want to look weak. And, like in the Westerns where it's like time for the guys to draw on each other and they're getting real jumpy.
Mm-hmm.
We just jumped a little fast and pulled the trigger too early. And turns out that the North Vietnamese didn't actually pull their gun. And so we kind of had to go back and go, yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
Yep.
So you're right. It's not just conspiracy theory that the Gulf of Tonkin was a miscommunication. It was, it came out later that, we should have not engaged.
Well, and I guess that's why it's important to know that like now it is a fact. It's not like we're, maybe, Admiral Morrison did this, him and, whoever else was involved, that was the spark that started the war.
Right.
And we were in the wrong. We should not have done that.
Yeah. So to what degree he was involved, that can be debated. But he was involved. And then his son went on to be Jim Morrison that we know of. So I guess my question is, do you think that Jim Morrison and some of these others that we're going to have, go over, was the idea that, or is the idea that Jim Morrison comes in as like a CIA agent and deliberately makes moves as a rock star? Or do you think that, like, when I think about my son in a few years, when he's the age that Jim Morrison would have been, like late teens, early 20s, I tell my son, Jim, hey, I got a fun job for you, son. I'm going to move you to Southern California and I want you to make some friends. Actually, some of my work buddies have some other friends that want to start a band. Why don't you start a band with them? You guys do whatever you want. I mean, how much direction do you think these parents were giving the kids,
I think a lot.
Okay.
I think that's specifically with Morrison. I think if you study his childhood and I mean, how many people, I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but how many people are military based, like spend his whole life on military bases. Mm-hmm. So his educational background is full steam ahead military. He should have followed in his dad's footsteps to be an admiral or some high ranking military officer. Mm-hmm. And then just almost immediately turns and goes and becomes a huge rock star who isn't actually a musician. Doesn't actually play music.
Yeah.
And actually isn't even that into music, but finds himself the, leader of the biggest band in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and also like, if you look at his life, he clearly goes through phases where it's almost like he's reinventing himself several times. That looks like an actor to me. That looks like somebody who's been trained to like, okay, son, maybe he went to Langley and everything. And they said, well, we need somebody to be a rock star because rock and roll is the latest, trend that's going to connect with the youth culture of America. And he's like, well, I'm a decent singer. Okay, well, grow your hair out, go out to Laurel Canyon, talk to Frank Zappa, and we'll get you hooked up to become the next big rock star. And all the while, I think him, if anybody on that list was taking marching orders from someone, it looks like him because he was just not, his whole trajectory to fame seems so inorganic. It just seems like they just like dropped him there. The idea that when I found out that he didn't actually play music, I was like, okay. Well,
I hadn't heard that, but I mean, I've never seen him with a guitar in his hand.
No, I think he could sing, and I think he was a great leader, like a front man for a band. But how many guys do you know that are professional musicians who actually don't play any instrument?
Right. And, you know, the same qualities that make up like a good team captain would make a good front man.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how to be in front of a group of people and like get a room fired up? That's your job.
There are other people that do it. Kanye West, I don't think he plays any instrument.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rappers that obviously don't play any instrument.
I'm just thinking of like,
but you're right.
The leadership.
Like leadership.
So
it's what qualifies you for the job isn't necessarily I can play 5 instruments and I'm versed in whatever background of music.
Yeah. Glad you brought up Zappa because he's another one with
George Strait. I don't think he plays music. I don't know, there's probably a couple country singers that don't play any instruments.
George Strait the one? Yeah, no, I was thinking of Vince Gill's the good guitar player.
Vince Gill's the amazing guitar player. That dude plays
for the Eagles, who also came from Laurel Canyon.
Vince Gill, man, is he on that list too?
He's not, but
he's an Okie boy, isn't he?
Well, that's a funny thing because like J.J. Cale is not on the Laurel Canyon list, but
neither is Leon Russell.
Correct, but so we've got some of we've got some Tulsans that were in and around all this. So if we had access to like a Leon Russell or a J.J. Cale, it'd be pretty fun to ask them like, do you think those guys were CIA guys or
was it odd to you that they seemed to just fly up the charts and you didn't?
Yeah, because I just read J.J. Cale's biography today, and it talks a little bit about he's originally from Oklahoma City, grew up in Tulsa. Him and Eric Clapton were buddies, and I thought, oh, Eric Clapton was hanging out with Frank Zappa and all these guys. J.J. Cale spent like a year out there and was right back in Tulsa playing bars. Whereas the Eagles just skyrocket, right?
Well, and I think that's who knows how the mechanism works or how this all happened, but I think the idea is that a lot of these people might also be useful idiots. So when you ask like who is taking orders from someone, I would say probably most of these people, most of them not, you know what I mean? Like, is probably more like coming from a label. Mm-hmm. And so your label or your manager might tell you, hey, we kind of want to push this idea or this, you know what I mean? Like, but you're not sitting down with the CIA to take a call and say, we need you to write a song about X, Y, and Z. And, you need to change your hairstyle. I think it was more like Project Mockingbird propping up media outlets, propping up record labels and things like that, kind of knowing, well, they're going to push the ideas that we want them to push, which are anti-war hippie stuff.
You brought up Zappa, and he's kind of known as the godfather of this whole hippie movement. I didn't know this before reading this book, but Laurel Canyon there near Hollywood was not really, it wasn't a music scene. So it's not like present day where you go, well, I really think Nashville, I'm going to go to Austin. I'm going to go to Nashville. Village, It's not like, well, that's where it's all happening. I'm going to go and see if I can make something happen there. The way that this works out is like, you got like, Jim Morrison, Frank Zappa, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Neil Young, John Denver. They all show up at Laurel Canyon inside of like 12 months of each other.
Wow.
And again, that's great. But there was like, even like, there's a quote from Neil Young, like, why did you go there? And a lot of these guys that I just listed, they're kind of like, it just seemed like a play. I don't know. We were just drawn there, man. And that's weird. You guys all decided in the same 12 months that you should just go to this place. And then you guys all just launched these amazing careers out of this one town that had nothing to do with music. There's no industry. There's no clubs there. There's no studios to
There are now, but
but
when they went out there, the clubs came because of what happened there, not because it existed. And so, And that could get, well, that's another important part of the book is, I forget the guy named Vito something, like where exactly the hippie movement originated from had to do with the Byrds, right? Yeah. And then a specific group of like, it was like a fashion, like a club, like it was a group of people. It was girls dancing and people dressing, and they could trace it back to this one shop where it's like the style, the flowers, a lot of what went on to become like mainstream culture. That's where it started. And it had to do with, and it looks really orchestrated because even the Byrds, they weren't good musicians. They weren't people weren't going to their shows to see the band. They didn't know who the band was. They didn't care who the band was. It was a freak show of almost like a circus of all these other people dressing strange and dancing strange and acting strange. And they were being like really used to draw people in and create a movement. And now maybe that happened in a vacuum and it just, I don't know, just happened. But that's what his idea is. Like, it seems really orchestrated because the clubs and then how the careers kind of built off that. It just seems like it wasn't organic.
Right. Yeah. This chapter's the Vito and his Freakers. That's kind of the name they're going for at the beginning. And you're right. The idea in that part of the book is that, the bands live were not all that great. And that's like by the admission of the musicians in the band. And this is where, like, for those of you that are music nerds, this is where like the famous Wrecking Crew comes into play. Carol Kay and all these other musicians that they played on all of these albums. And so the recordings are great. But it's all the same.
That's not the band though. Yeah.
So, and then, sound systems being what they are in the 60s. And if it's just about it being a party scene, you're not really noticing if the live sound is that great, because, like, just to your point, you're really going to be seen at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and you're also going to watch these Vito and his Freakers dance around. And really the clubs are counting on Vito to bring these girls to get the party going. It's no different from today.
It's exactly,
if the band brings hot girls, you hire the band.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and also, yes, people didn't care so much that the band kind of sucked because there's hot girls dancing around and getting the party going. So that's what I mean by, like, it looked orchestrated. Like, we got to, we need to create this, get this music out there, but we don't exactly have the greatest musicians. Well, it doesn't really matter,
Right. Yeah.
Throw these crazy hippies in there, but that quickly turned into attracting. Well, I mean, I think there were people involved with it. One of the key figures is Charles Manson. Gets deeply involved in this, and there's a lot of things that indicate that he might have been a CIA asset, that MK Ultra, that he was some sort of, I mean, his life, you could go into it if you want to. It's very dark. I don't know if I even want to talk about it, but like, there's been a lot of books written on his life and what it was like, but it doesn't seem, could he have been MK Ultra? Absolutely. And maybe MK Ultra wasn't supposed to go crazy and murder a bunch of people.
Right.
You know what I mean? But we got to remember that the CIA didn't, it's not like they tested LSD on rats before they released it to the public. This was all covert operations, and they didn't exactly, I don't know if people exactly knew what was going to happen,
Sure.
And it might be that, Charles Manson was positioned being friends with Neil Young and all these people. He was rubbing shoulders with all these people, and he was supposed to be a huge rock star. Like, he was going to be
auditioned for, I can't remember if it was the Byrds, but I mean,
it was the Byrds.
So this line in the book here is, Charlie and his family weren't just a peripheral flock of crazed killers among the Laurel Canyon sovereigns. To the contrary, the family mingled with many of the canyon's rock stars. So this section of the book is going on, and it goes into more detail about, like, no, we're not kidding. We're talking about, like, the Beach Boys were hanging out with Charles Manson and the family. Like, and Yeah, their little commune wasn't far from Laurel Canyon. I mean, he was in the front yard playing music with the guys from the Monkees, so.
And there's some other serial killer who's out of prison now who plays music.
It's not Phil Spector, is it?
No, gosh, I'll think of it in a second. No, it's not a serial killer. It's a guy who shot Reagan. Is that who it is? I think. I have to look that up. But his music is terrible.
But I mean, it's with Charles Manson specifically. I mean,
his music's pretty bad too.
People make jokes about his music, but you go, well, yeah. And I'm not taking up for Charles Manson and Michael Richards in the same episode. I'm just saying, some of these other bands, they had producers, they had songwriters. So
we'll go through the list of okay, that'd be the next cool thing. Go through. This is McGowan's point about how many coincidences do you have before you start to think there's something funny going on. If you just thought about yourself, how many friends, especially artist friends, do you have who come from intelligence families? I have one. I have one friend who's an artist whose family is CIA. That's it. Maybe you have more. I don't know.
Yes.
You do
right. No, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I'm with you. Yeah. I don't know anyone who's military intelligence specifically. Oh no, I do know one. I don't know. They're not CIA that I know of, but I can only think of one person who I don't even know. It's like 1 degree of separation that works in military intelligence. So it's pretty uncommon, at least in our world.
Yeah.
And many of these people that McGowan lists off that all end up in Laurel Canyon in 1964 specifically are all from the East Coast, like right around Norfolk, Virginia,
DC.
They all moved from DC to Laurel Canyon.
Yes.
And you're right. They all meet up and become buddies. And it doesn't seem like any of them go, "This is the weirdest thing." We all grew up at the same
We went
school.
to the same military school.
And we all just coincidentally ended up in the same town.
I'll be damned.
Right next to this Lookout Mountain base.
It's a covert military base right in the middle of Laurel Canyon where we all want to.
We just came out here to get away from it all. Yeah, I mean, like Zappa, for instance, his dad was a chemical warfare engineer, and then Zappa's wife was in kindergarten with Jim Morrison.
Yeah, on the same military base.
Squeaky from Charles Manson's family was in high school with. Oh, I'm jumping ahead. I want to get into Phil Hartman and actors.
Oh, I don't think we have time for all that. No, we don't have time for that.
But I'm just saying the amount of connections of people with, to your point, I know of one person I can think of that I don't even know personally that's in military intelligence. Mm-hmm. You just mentioned one person that you know. I can barely name 10 people I know that are in the military, let alone a specific faction of it, right? And now here you go. Here are these people that are unique in the fact that they all moved to Laurel Canyon just in the last 12 months. They're all exceptionally talented and their careers all take off at the same time. And none of them seem to think it's a strange coincidence that they all came from the same other side of the country and that their parents all come from they're all naval officers, intelligence operatives. And then, not just, it'd be different if you go, well, yeah, my dad was in the Army too. Because this is all a generation that
after World War II.
Exactly. Yeah, so baby boomers, that's what I started thinking at the beginning of the book. Well, how uncommon or how common was it for everybody to have military parents? Probably very common. But that would be more like my buddy's dad. He was more like a logistics guy.
Yeah.
He delivered.
Or even he was just in the war, but he's got a career military, also career military intelligence.
Yeah.
Not just Uncle Frank served in the war, Yeah,
I mean, you got guys like David Crosby. McGowan goes into some detail about the bloodline of David Crosby that goes back to the founders of the country. So it's not even just military high-ranking officials, but also founding father type bloodlines that it goes back to for some of these people.
So let's do a list.
Okay.
Okay. So obviously Jim Morrison, Dave Crosby, deep military intelligence family. Wasn't Janis Joplin also military intelligence?
Her dad was a CEO for like Citgo.
Oh,
not CEO, but he was like a higher up.
But Jimi Hendrix was military. He was
let's talk Jimi Hendrix for a second, because when you mentioned that, I knew he had spent some time in the military, but he
is not the real interesting part of it. It's his manager.
Well,
he was in the military, but his manager was a really shady guy who bragged about being in the CIA, which is weird that you'd say you're managing a rock star and you're an intelligence officer for the CIA. I mean, he admitted it.
Right. Let's see. I'm looking for.
And I think that's where a lot of this happens. It's again, I think it'd be weird if these people are sitting down with an intelligence person to like tell them what to say and do. I think it happens with managers and agents and record labels, and it's an influence from the top down that's more subtle than that.
Yeah.
Like if your manager, if Jimi Hendrix manager was actually working for the CIA for whatever reason, you're never going to notice no one knows the manager. Tell me your favorite rock star, and I could ask you who's their manager and where are they from, what do they do? You'll have no idea.
I just was thinking like I play in a band that has a manager, and I think we just changed managers, and I don't know who that is.
But how much of the work that you end up doing is
the manager
calls all the shots.
Yeah.
You're just showing up and doing the gig. You don't know what's going on. He could have a total agenda, and you wouldn't.
That's why bands want to have a manager.
Yes,
so they don't have to do things like that, like make decisions. I'm looking for Hendrix's manager, but I came across just Hendrix's time in the military in the meantime. And it's one thing is that he reportedly had gone into the military as more like he had gotten in trouble with the law. So they said, well, you can go to jail or you can go to the military. But then he became like an elite Air Force type. I mean, he was like a paratrooper or something.
Yeah.
And then he broke his foot and got discharged. And the point McGowan makes in the book is if he had been enlisted in the military for some kind of illegal punishment, it's pretty wild that they would put him in like an elite force, some kind of special operations. And if he did injure his foot, but he was still like serving time, it seems like they would put him in like an admin role.
Yeah, it sounds like a backstory they gave him to make him seem cool, like a rebel.
Yeah, exactly.
He was in the military, but he wasn't down with that.
Yeah, he wasn't, exactly. Yeah.
He's only doing it because they had to.
Let's see if I can find his manager, but he's not the only. You're right. I think it was either maybe the Byrds manager, or if it was, that was like a retired Marine that had spent time in Cuba when there was a revolution in Cuba. Like we had put a coup on in Cuba as the U.S., and this guy just happened to be there he just wanted to be there to see it happen for humanitarian reasons or whatever.
He's vacationing.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, hopefully this conversation is not coming off too frenetic. But it's just because the amount of examples that McGowan cites are just one after another.
Yeah. I mean, if you get his book, I mean, there's probably 30 plus people that are huge rock stars of the time that, all come from military families and military intelligence backgrounds.
It's not just that's like really unusual. But to make a point of like how many coincidences does it take? The amount of deaths by like
fall
in the shower on a bullet.
Jimi Hendrix, and I mean lots of them dying, and the amount of suicides connected to it, both these stars and their families. So a lot of slipping in the shower and landing on the bullet.
The statistic in America is like if you're a white person in America, your chances of being murdered or something like 1 in 450,000. I mean, it's pretty slim. But if you were living in Laurel Canyon between 1964 to 1968. It was
scales up a bit.
It's like 1 in 4. I mean,
oh God,
yeah. I mean, people were just dying like crazy.
And you could say the argument against that, I think, could be like, well, yeah, they were also doing a lot of drugs.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, it was a wild, and there was like, for some weird reason, the other thing that was weird was none of these people were getting drafted. Right. None of these people were getting arrested for. I mean, whether you agree or disagree, the drug charges, there were strict drug laws at the time, and they were all openly using drugs. Nobody's getting arrested for it. And also there's the draft on, and no one's getting drafted. And you would think if you're the establishment and there's all these anti-war movement people coming up who are a thorn in your side, you could very easily just draft them all to the front lines.
Totally.
Like you could,
like Elvis went to war.
Like if you were the CIA,
that's why
and you wanted to get rid of Jimi Hendrix or whoever, pick whoever it might be. It's not like it would be hard to do.
Yeah,
you could get them on drug charges. You could walk in any minute. You could walk into their house and you could arrest them.
If we could pull this Gulf of Tonkin stunt and just make the war happen, it seems pretty plausible that hey, this David Crosby's getting a little mouthy. Why don't we just go ahead and put him in the service? And if he doesn't want to go, we'll just put him in jail, right? If you get the book or you listen to it, chapter 3 opens with just a laundry list of all of these people that are like kind of what we've been listing off, but I mean, goes into detail for everybody of how they got there, and they all died. And like you said, fall and slip on a bullet. Now, yes, there were a lot of drugs involved, but I mean, one of the deaths that the first one that came to mind when you go, well, there were a lot of drugs and substance abuse. Keith Moon's one that I kind of just readily accepted as like, well, he just drank himself to death. I mean, it was like widely known that he was a big partier. But his was one where the medication he was on was for alcohol withdrawal, but no, there was somebody else that had had a morphine overdose, but they were in a home, like where they would not have had access to morphine. It would have been like monitored to the point where they couldn't have overdosed on morphine. But again, Keith Moon was one that I forget the specifics of, but it wasn't an alcohol overdose like they reported. It was actually like, God, man, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting it, but
no, I don't know. But
my point is, some of these, like another one in here was a guy that committed suicide, quote unquote. But the weird thing was, after he had shot himself, he beat himself to death and poured gasoline on himself. And he had some matches sitting next to him, almost like as if somebody else might have beat him up and then,
lit him on fire.
Was going to light him on fire, but they got ran off. There are a lot of like suspicious suicide, quote unquote suicides, or like you said, family members where I forget who it was now, but there was a case where one of the celebrities' families, it was a mother and the son, both
a lot of Vince Fosters out there.
They both committed suicide on the same day in the same house by chance.
Like, but that was another weird point too, was the day that Jim Morrison died is the same day that they decommissioned his dad's ship.
I just read about that.
That started the incident, and it was like, I mean, it could be a coincidence, but it's also like, that's weird that would happen on the same day.
A lot of these deaths happen on October 12th, which is, I think, is Aleister Crowley's birthday.
It goes back to Satan.
Yeah.
So just to pivot a little bit, the reason we thought this would be interesting to do is because this Sunday is the Super Bowl, and we couldn't help but notice that it looks like, at least from a capitalist perspective, that a certain football franchise has really used the celebrity cachet of Taylor Swift to make a lot more money, which is nothing wrong with that. I think you were saying it was like $350 million of additional revenue has gone into the Chiefs program because of Taylor Swift just going to games.
Either the Chiefs specifically or just the NFL in general is saying indirectly
so then the NFL would be in a position where they're like, we kind of really want the Chiefs to play. Why? Because she's going to the game and we're all making a lot more money.
Yeah.
And, that's a very clear way. Like, you don't have to be smart to figure that equation out and just go, okay, if it reminds me of when is Lil Wayne. I think it was Lil Wayne in Oklahoma City at some point. It was about 10 years ago. He was going to a Thunder game. And I don't know if you remember this story, but he went to go and he didn't have a ticket. Like he's just used to just letting him in. And the security guard wouldn't let him in and said, "You don't have a ticket. You can't come in." And he was like, I bring money to the stadium. Like people come here because I'm here. And I could just picture some like really butch redneck.
Hey, I don't know who you think you are, Chief.
I know you think you are a little Wayne or a little John or whoever you are.
Without a ticket.
You ain't got a ticket. You ain't coming through this line.
Yeah.
And he got all upset and was like, "Kevin Durant invited me personally, blah, blah, blah." And it's like, yeah, not in Oklahoma.
So what's that Wayne's World where he says a lot of people's girlfriends are in there? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because on the surface, the first time I heard something about, well, actually the NFL theory, like you said, that one made a lot of sense to me. Yeah. Like I was kind of like, oh, of course they want Taylor Swift to, but then not long after that, I heard like rumblings. The simulation was serving up things for me to hear where it was, well, the conservatives are really concerned that the Democrats are going to get her, endorsement, and that's going to be really good for Biden's campaign. And then, well, but if they can maybe get her to endorse the side on the right,
it does make a difference. Like I had a conversation the other day with someone who works for a marketing agency that represents Phil Robertson with the Duck Dynasty.
Okay.
And she was telling me about the influence that he had on Trump's election. And it's huge. Yeah. Like you would, like they do the data, so they run the numbers, and she's like, "Oh, absolutely, he helped him become president," and like not in a small way. Like you would think he's, but him, I think he showed up at some rallies and just giving that endorsement. You're talking about hundreds of millions of votes of people that honestly they're pretty influenced by him.
You think about when Rogan has somebody on his podcast, and like a Lazar, for instance, I think is one that a lot of people would have been like, "Oh, what a kook." And then people, after he's on Rogan, people go, "Well, I mean, Rogan talked to him." And then all of a sudden, like...
He also talks to Eddie Bravo, but...
Well, that's a really good point, yeah.
And I like Eddie. Eddie, if you ever happen to hear this, I love Eddie Bravo, but you think the earth is flat, so I don't.
Yeah, before I think that was, when we were talking about topics, I noticed we'd threatened to do Flat Earth a couple of times, but then this Taylor Swift thing really got.
Well, we should do that next.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to. I think this is a good stopping point as far as like if this has not piqued your interest.
Before we stop though, the point I was going to make is that it looks like what was happening in Laurel Canyon. The reason was because that was the pop, like music, and as a medium, like that's where it was at. Like that's what was relevant to pop culture and to people. And so why would the CIA or any agency, focus in on that or try to use that to their advantage? Well, it's because it was relevant. And I believe that's changed now. I think there's probably is still some of that going on, but obviously with the advent of the internet and where we are today, you conspiracy dads out there, you should think about, well, where would they be? YouTube influencers today? Definitely. I mean, internet is a military operation. So there's a lot of influence going on. I think that it also shifted to corporations. I think that a lot of these companies like Elon Musk, like, Mark Zuckerberg, they're absolutely, even if they're unaware of it, like you can't look at someone like Musk and say, well, oh, he just built his empire on his own. No, the people that make a lot of money and are really successful, they're almost always deeply connected to government contracts, government work. I mean, Musk is who he is because the federal government backed his companies in a lot of ways, in more than one way, both through NASA and through Tesla. And I'm not saying that's a criticism. I'm just saying that, like, you don't think that comes with some sort of caveat, like, hey, we're going to give you, we're going to prop you up, but also we might need to talk from time to time. I think it'd be foolish to think that they don't. I mean, Zuckerberg, that guy just looks like a CIA, like a spook. Like he doesn't look he doesn't look organic. He doesn't look like, I mean, I think if you think about how the amount of money and the way they just skyrocket, I just think if you were working a job where the federal government could influence, whatever in some small way, you would see right away how it makes a huge difference. Say you get like, half your contracts are federal or something like that. You go, wow, it's a lot of money.
It doesn't take much. Yeah. I mean, you see it on a much smaller scale, just with small businesses, whoever the big client is, like for instance, when I worked in radio, whether it was the big car dealer or the big bar owner that was your biggest client. Yeah. He had influence in the building. So you go, well, let's scale that up like 13,000x.
Yeah.
And say it's the federal government, and you're, like you said, your business is largely sustained by that. You don't think that you're not going to have a politician come to you and go, hey, remember last year when we bailed you out again? Going to need to turn in a favor for me.
Yeah. Just makes sense. Well, anyway, that's a good stopping point for this one. Maybe we'll pick it up at the next one with, we might do a 2-part on this because you want to do Hollywood.
Because
there's more Hollywood that we.
I had no idea the extent to which. I mean, the Young Turks early in Hollywood, and then you get into a little bit later. Some of the, again, like Phil Hartman was one that I had no idea was on the radar for any of this, and there's a story about him in there. So,
well, we'll pick it up with Hollywood on the next one, and then we'll try to get into Flat Earth. But thank you for listening to the Conspiracy Dad podcast. We appreciate everybody, and we'll see you next time.